Nuclear war. It's a prospect so frightening that a special term had to be coined to measure the consequences. Megadeath. That's a unit of 1 million deaths, used primarily in estimating or predicting the fatalities that would occur in a nuclear war. If a full-scale nuclear war were to break out between Russia and the US, generally accepted as the world's largest nuclear powers, the outcome would be, as military analyst Donald Brennan so aptly phrased it 6 decades ago, mutually assured destruction. At 6.6 million and 3.81 million square miles respectively, Russia and the US are the nations with the largest and third largest territories on Earth. Yet, as we'll discover, even a limited full-scale exchange of strategic nuclear weapons between the two sides would kill tens of millions quickly and make survival extremely challenging for the survivors across most of those vast lands. The sheer size of the two nations, added to the great variety of natural ecosystems located within them, means that there are some places where your chances of survival are much greater than others if nuclear war broke out. So let's take a look at the 9 safest places in the US to survive a nuclear war. Some of the locations might surprise you. As we'll see, the medium and long-term effects of a nuclear war would likely touch every person on Earth, more than half of them terminally. It's debatable whether slowly wasting away from the cancers caused by chronic, incurable radiation poisoning is a preferable way to go than getting vaporized instantly in the epicenter of a nuclear blast. But if you want to survive a nuclear war, common sense dictates that step 1 is getting as far away from the most likely targets of a nuclear attack as possible. So, where are the primary targets for Russian nuclear warheads, or Chinese or North Korean, or even Israeli ones for that matter, most likely to be? For decades, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD for short, has been based on the principle that if one nuclear power fires upon another with nuclear weapons, the others will respond in kind. This will continue tit for tat until the other side, or more likely both, are incapable of attacking further. The initial targets in a nuclear exchange would almost certainly be aimed at taking out the enemy's ability to retaliate, i.e. its nuclear forces. Both Russia and the US have well in excess of 5,000 strategic nuclear warheads and the means to launch them, on ICBMs from land-based missile silos, strategic bombers in the air, or nuclear-powered submarines under the waves. In terms of targets, the lowest hanging fruit would be the command and control centers, nuclear missile storage facilities, ground-based silos, submarine bases, and air bases housing the US's strategic bombers and fighters on the US mainland. So, if we're talking about the very worst places to be when a nuclear war starts, in and around these locations is where you don't want to be. Fortunately, with one glaring exception, the US military has considerately placed most of these locations in remote parts of the country, precisely to minimize potential fatalities in the event of a nuclear war breaking out. Given the potential for secondary explosions, arguably the worst places to be are in proximity to Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Hill Air Force Base in Davis County, Utah. That's because these bases are considered to be the US's primary depots for nuclear missile storage. While Kirtland AFB is within the greater city limits of Albuquerque, it's some 13 miles from the center of this city of 560,000 people. Hill AFB is 6 miles from the nearest city, Ogden, population 83,000, and some 30 miles from the nearest biggest city, Salt Lake City, whose population is around 1.3 million. The US's primary Minuteman silos are more remote. Malmstrom Air Force Base is approximately 8 miles from Great Falls, Montana. With a population of just over 60,000, it's the only notable urban settlement within an hour-and-a-half's drive away. F.E. Warren Air Force Base is only some 3 miles from Cheyenne, Wyoming, which has a similar population to Great Falls. But the nearest large city, Denver, Colorado, is approximately 2 hours north of the base. The third major silo location, Minot Air Force Base, is approximately 13 miles north of Minot, North Dakota, population 47,000. The next nearest urban centers of significance are at least 200 miles away, with the nearest large city actually being Edmonton in Alberta, Canada, which is some 540 miles away. The US's major nuclear submarine and aircraft bases are alarmingly much closer to major urban centers. Naval Base Kitsap, for example, is on the Kitsap Peninsula, just 10 miles across the Puget Sound from Seattle. In addition to the 4 million people in the Seattle metropole, the base is also just 50 miles from Tacoma, Washington, which houses a further 228,000 people. Naval Submarine Base Kings Bay is also just 30 miles from the nearest large population center, Jacksonville, Florida, with a population approaching 1 million residents. Whiteman Air Force Base is just 60 miles southeast of Kansas City, Missouri, with a population of 516,000, while Barksdale Air Force Base is located in Bossier Parish, Louisiana, just 4.7 miles east-southeast of Bossier City. The Shreveport-Bossier City metropolitan area has a population of approximately 389,000 people. As for the US's 6 primary nuclear command and control centers, they're also, for the most part, far from the madding crowd. Jim Creek Naval Radar Station, for example, is less than 4 miles away from the nearest town, Arlington, Washington, with a population of 21,000, but approximately 1.5 hours north of Seattle, Washington, the nearest large urban center. On the opposite side of the country, the VLF transmitter Cutler is even more remote. Located in Washington County, Maine, the nearest towns with populations of over 30,000 residents are at least 100 miles away. On the other hand, the Lualua VLF transmitter in Hawaii is located just 27 miles from downtown Honolulu, with a population of around 350,000. The US's Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base is even closer, just 12 miles from downtown Omaha, Nebraska, with around 1 million people in the greater Omaha metropolitan area. Peterson Space Force Base, which hosts NORAD, or the North American Aerospace Defense Command, is just 8 miles from downtown Colorado Springs, the second largest city in Colorado, with a population of about 416,000 people, with a further 630,000 in the surrounding El Paso County. Of all the initial targets for incoming nukes, NORAD is likely to be the second on the list. The first is one you'd expect. That's likely to be the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., the beating heart of US military power. Indeed, given how much of US's power in general is concentrated in the city, being within DC's 68.3 square mile radius is almost certainly the very last place in the nation you'd want to be in such a scenario. If the first nuke doesn't go as planned, it's a sure bet more would follow in quick succession. However, all things considered, if a nuclear attack on the US were confined to just these strikes on the US's nuclear forces, large parts of the country would be far enough away from the blast for most to survive the initial effects. The explosions, fireballs, heat waves, and electromagnetic pulses. But how far away is far enough? Well, to an extent that depends on the explosive power of the detonation, and whether the warhead detonates upon impact with the surface or above the target. To maximize the destructive power of a nuclear explosion, the idea is to maximize the overpressure, measured in pounds per square inch or psi. In particular, if you can attain an overpressure of 5 psi, the majority of structures will be destroyed, with death for the people in or near them almost inevitable. That's why most nuclear weapons are designed for airburst as opposed to surface explosion. Detonation at an optimal airburst height maximizes the radius of the 5 psi overpressure, ensuring that the blast effect covers the largest possible area of the target. At the right altitude, the shock wave reflects off the ground and combines with a primary wave to form a stronger, so-called Mach stem. By doing so, this increases the overpressure at the edges of the blast zone. According to Alex Wellerstein, a professor and historian of nuclear technology, if we assume a single 5 psi airburst explosion of a single 20 megaton Sarmat warhead over a single target, everything within a roughly 15-mile radius will be nearly vaporized by intense heat rising to millions of degrees Fahrenheit. And we do mean everything. Within seconds, the blast wave would also destroy residential buildings up to 442 square miles away from the blast, blowing out windows, ejecting wreckage at 784 miles per hour outward from the blast, and in all likelihood causing widespread fires. The electromagnetic pulse would shut down every car, smartphone, computer, and other unshielded electronic devices for miles. And as far as 3,490 square miles from the blast, glass windows would be expected to break. As for the heat wave, everyone within the thermal radiation radius, around 2,360 square miles of the explosion, would be at risk of suffering third-degree burns throughout the skin, which can cause severe scarring, disablement, or even amputation. Small comfort, but at least you probably won't feel any of that because your pain nerves will have been transformed into ash. Now, 2,360 square miles is only slightly larger than the Everglades National Park or the state of Delaware. So, given the remoteness of many of these locations, while millions would likely die from this initial set of strikes, tens of millions would survive the initial blasts. The problem is, they're unlikely to end there. Both Russia and the US can launch hundreds of nukes from submarines, which could be anywhere in the Earth's 139 million square miles of ocean. So, even in the unlikely event that every incoming ICBM successfully hits its target at maximum strength, the other side can and will retaliate. And if the Russians have taken major damage, they'll likely escalate to hitting major cities, critical infrastructure, and conventional military bases and equipment. Within a matter of hours or possibly even minutes, all the nation's major centers will be at serious risk. Needless to say, after staying well away from the US's key nuclear sites, the next safest place you can be is as far away as possible from this secondary range of targets. But where are they most likely to be? Experts suggest that the primary targets will be key infrastructure in cities like New York, where the light blast damage radius would extend out to New Brunswick and Stamford. In fact, much of the East Coast, including Boston, Philadelphia, Richmond, and Norfolk in Virginia, Savannah, Georgia, and Orlando and Miami in Florida, would also be prime targets. On the West Coast, much of California would be hit, including San Diego, Los Angeles, and the Bay Area from San Francisco down to Monterey, as would Portland, Oregon further north. Phoenix, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Boise, Denver, Oklahoma City, and Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and the Dallas-Fort Worth areas, all in Texas, would also all be prime targets. Further east, Atlanta, Nashville, Chicago, Indianapolis, Milwaukee, Columbus, Ohio, and Detroit would likely also be targeted. These targets scattered around the entire nation greatly shrink the number of places that wouldn't be affected by the initial blast. Then there's the radiation poisoning from the fallout to worry about. Within 15 minutes, the first fallout particles would start hitting the ground, and the fallout would rapidly spread, turning targeted cities into whole affected regions. Almost all of California and coastal New England would be at risk. The entire state of Florida would also be in a challenging situation, but most likely rushing to evacuate, while the rest of the eastern United States would struggle with fallout ranging from minor to severe. But it doesn't end there. Due to the unpredictability of wind patterns, it's likely that no matter where you are in the country, you'll need to shelter in place for days, if not weeks, before it's safe to be exposed to the air outside. In areas close to the blast, where radiation is greater than 1 sievert per hour, you'd probably need 3 weeks in a shelter to survive. In medium fallout areas, where radiation is at 0.1 to 1 sievert per hour, you'd need to spend 1 to 3 weeks in a shelter. Even in minor fallout areas, with 0.01 to 0.1 sieverts per hour, you need to spend 2 to 7 days sheltering. However, even if you emerge into a relatively safe radioactive environment, the challenges of surviving for any great period of time would only just begin. The nuclear blast would cause global cooling and reduce crop yield, not just in the US but worldwide, because of the vast quantities of dust and soot propelled into the high atmosphere. Some 90% of the world's population would be in danger of starvation within months. Plus, due to the sheer volume of fallout ejected into the atmosphere, food production wouldn't return to normal for upwards of 10 years after the explosions. Humans will likely have to make difficult decisions about whether to allocate dwindling grain reserves to livestock or human feed. Plus, there's almost certainly going to be a deep breakdown in security across the nation as a result of the carnage caused by the blast, fried infrastructure, and mass fatalities. You could be dealing with gangs of looters and a plethora of other dystopian circumstances as millions of survivors become increasingly desperate. Putting it all together, the safest places in the US to be in a nuclear war, which will likely be over within hours, will be not only the places furthest from blast and radiation rings, but also places where access to food and water, supportive communities of fellow survivors, and other enablers of self-sufficiency are available. That means states like Maine, at least in the areas as far away from the VLF transmitter Cutler as possible. As mentioned earlier, the transmitter station is likely to be one of the initial targets. With its rugged coastline, dense forests, and limited urban sprawl, Maine offers isolation and self-reliance that few states can match, with its abundance of fresh water, farmland, and fishing communities supporting long-term survival. Rural regions like Aroostook County provide vast, sparsely populated terrain that looks ideal for riding out a nuclear winter. Also in the northeast of the country, Vermont is one of the best places to be, with the state's isolation being its greatest strength. Small, green, and tucked far from major cities, Vermont's rolling hills and dense forests offer both concealment and natural resources. Clean rivers, fertile farmland, and low population density with tight-knit rural communities, pretty much the entire state is not just safe, but sustainable even in the harshest scenarios. Montana's sprawling landscapes and low population density offer similar benefits. While it once hosted missile silos during the Cold War, most are now decommissioned. That means the southern parts of the state, far from Kansas City and St. Louis, the closest likely targets for nuclear blasts, are about as far away from blast epicenters as you can get. The state's remoteness, access to fresh air and water, and resilient infrastructure, coupled with the protection offered by its valleys and mountain ranges, make it one of the safest places to be during and following a nuclear exchange. North Dakota is another state that used to house nuclear missile silos, which have subsequently been decommissioned. Today, it's largely agricultural and thinly populated, which makes it both overlooked and resilient as a survivalist location. Its open landscapes allow easy mobility and access to farmland, water, and wind power, while its central location minimizes coastal risks. The big issue here is the extreme cold, especially during a nuclear winter. However, if you can handle the icy conditions, North Dakota's simplicity, self-reliance, and geography offer an ideal refuge from the Mad Max world likely to follow a large-scale nuclear confrontation. On the west coast, the safest place to be is probably eastern Oregon, far from Portland to the north and Sacramento to the south as far as possible. Beyond its natural beauty, Oregon's inland regions are relatively well shielded from major strike zones and boast forested highlands and fertile valleys perfect for off-grid living. The moderate climate, agricultural resources, and freshwater lakes support sustainable survival, with the interior parts of the state protected from the worst of the fallout from strikes on Portland and in the Seattle area by mountain barriers. All in all, Oregon's balance of accessibility, environment, and preparedness culture makes it one of the most resilient corners of the country. Idaho's outlying areas offer a similar set of advantages. You don't want to be too close to Boise, a likely target. However, all along the state's borders with Nebraska, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and even northwest Illinois, mountain ranges and forests offer geographical insulation. Rural Idaho's mix of rugged wilderness, low population density, rich farmland, and freshwater sources ensure self-sufficiency, while small tight-knit towns promote community resilience. The state's extensive public lands also make it easier to find shelter or relocate. Much of Wyoming, particularly the northern areas furthest away from large cities, in other states like Salt Lake City and Denver, is also likely to be one of the safest places to be. Home to wide valleys, freshwater streams, and ample grazing land, the state provides the resources needed for long-term survival. In the north, far removed from major military or industrial zones, Wyoming's small towns embody independence and resilience, while the Bighorn Mountains and Wind River Range provide both shelter and security. By combining natural beauty with strategic safety, Wyoming arguably represents the best balance of isolation and livability post-nuclear war. Now, if you prefer to ride out nuclear winter in drier, more arid conditions, rural Utah is likely to tick all your boxes. Its dry climate reduces fallout risks, while countless natural shelters, from red rock caves to secluded valleys, offer ample refuge. Of course, we're talking about the parts of the state furthest away from Salt Lake City and the F.E. Warren and Peterson Air Force bases that are likely to be prime initial targets. Outside Salt Lake City, much of the state remains sparsely populated, with vast desert landscapes, high plateaus, and remote canyons, making it both beautiful and strategically safe. The state's strong preparedness culture, shaped by history and geography, combined with its seclusion and sustainability, makes it a strong contender for long-term survival. Finally, if remoteness is the key to survivability, you just can't beat Alaska. Shielded by sheer distance, Alaska's remoteness alone makes it one of the best survival spots on Earth. That is, if you can handle some of the most brutal, iciest winters on the planet. That said, the state's vast wilderness provides abundant clean water, fish, and game for sustenance. So, provided you're comfortable with a rugged lifestyle, Alaska's enormous landmass offers true escape from population chaos, with nature, isolation, and resilience forming the ultimate line of defense. Depending on the location of the blast, some models also point to parts of Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi as relatively safe. However, according to experts like John Erath, the Senior Policy Director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, there's no question any nuclear war or weapons detonation would be bad for everyone. Nowhere is truly safe from fallout and other consequences like contamination of food and water supplies and prolonged radiation exposure. Similarly, Christian G. Appy, director of the Ellsberg Initiative for Peace and Democracy at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, told Newsweek that even a relatively small nuclear war would cause a nuclear winter famine that would kill at least 1 billion people, adding that it was morally repugnant to think about the safest places to survive a nuclear war because a major nuclear war would throw so much soot and debris into the stratosphere that it would produce a nuclear winter that would kill all or nearly all of those who survived the blast, firestorms, and radiation of the war. The bottom line is that, as Erath suggests, we would all do well to remember former President Ronald Reagan's words, recently reaffirmed by President Joe Biden. A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Now, make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay informed about all matters military. Thanks for watching.